All you want to do is buy your house or sell your house. But it's a lot more complicated transaction that you might consider and involves a lot more people than you might think. I made a list, I counted up, you would not believe I came up with 10 different people that may be involved with your transaction. Now every transaction doesn't have all of them, but a lot of transactions do. So let's count down, I'm not counting down or up. I mean, the majority of them are equally important once we kind of get past the buyer and the seller. Then it's all pretty much, everyone's important to make your transaction go through. Before we get going, don't forget to like and subscribe our channel so you don't miss out on any of our great videos. All right, so who are these 10 people involved in the transaction of buying or selling a home? Okay, let's take it right from the top, the seller. The seller is a person who's invested time, energy, love. Their family's been in that home. They are probably the most emotionally invested in this transaction. And I think it's important to realize for everyone else how emotionally invested a seller is in their home. Unless it's, like a flipper or a renter, they came in, they flipped it, they're not as emotionally invested. But generally, a seller is so emotionally invested in their home. So when you come in and you underbid, that's like knife to the heart. Or if you come in as a buyer and you have your inspection and you're like criticizing this and that. Again, let's remember that this, from almost everyone else's point of view in this transaction, it's really like an emotionalist transaction. But for the seller, they have their heart and soul invested in that transaction. And I really think it's important that everyone else involved in that transaction keep in mind what is involved with the seller. That being said, the seller needs to be aware that it is a transaction. They might be more emotionally invested, but the seller has to keep in mind what they really are. It's a financial transaction. By the time you make the decision to sell, you are moving from kind of pulling your emotion out of that home and making it, you have a lot of finances invested then, like what can you do with the money you get out of your home? Invest, buy, move, all these different things. So a seller really needs to kind of try to make that transition as they put their home on the market from emotional investment to switching to kind of like a financial investment. 2, the listing agent. It's really important that the seller finds the right listing agent. You want a listing agent that is a number of things. You want somebody who is knowledgeable, somebody who's going to do a great job marketing your home, somebody that's going to price your home right, somebody that's going to be communicative with all the other people in the transaction. If you don't have a seller's agent who is right on it with their communication, offers can fall apart or deadlines can be missed. So you're going to want a seller's agent, a listing agent, who is really committed to getting your transaction done. I would say a seller's agent is really not as emotionally invested, but the way they're invested is in the seller. So they're not invested emotionally in the home, but a lot of times they're invested in the seller. It becomes a friendship. It becomes a relationship that you want to get what's best for your seller. And so you become emotionally invested for your seller, trying to get the home in the perfect condition, trying to get the home at the highest price, get best pictures, all those things. I think one of the things that a listing agent has to balance with a seller is maybe getting in that preparation process of getting your home on the market, being sensitive to the fact that it's their home, but you're trying to move them to that, next phase, that phase of being a financial decision. So they need to maybe take down their pictures. They maybe should paint something. They need to get some furniture out. And as a listing agent, it's your job to help a seller get to that next step. So we have our seller, we have our selling agent, now we have our buyers. And our buyers are, all different kinds of buyers, first-time buyers, last-time buyers, investors, parents helping buyers, all different kinds. And I would say that buyers, kind of depends on the market, how the energy that they bring to it. Like in the spring market of 2022, buyers were like intense also because they knew they had to be. You had to get in there, see a home, make an offer, be ready to go. I think buyers outside of the 2022 market can kind of be different ranges. Like they can be I want the perfect house. Go see it when it comes in. I'll put an offer. You can have the buyers like, I'm moving to the city. I need a new house. I need it now. You can have the buyers like, we're outgrowing this home. It's not whenever we get to it, but it's not urgent either. It's kind of like, let's get more invested in the market. And so that's the third person in the transaction is the buyer. The buyer's responsibility are to know what kind of home they're looking for. Buyer's responsibility are to have their finances in order. Buyer's responsibility are to communicate with their lending agent, and we'll talk about them later, and your agent. So each person in this transaction has responsibilities. That's the buyer's responsibilities. All right, so we had seller, seller's agent, buyer. Now we have the buying agent. The buyer's agent is someone who's there to advocate for the buyer. And that's why in the state of Wisconsin it's extremely important that you sign a buyer agency agreement between the buyer and the buyer's agent. Technically in the state of Wisconsin, if the buyer doesn't sell a buyer's agency agreement, the buying agent works for the seller. So that means if you go through with an agent and you didn't sign a buyer agency agreement, they can, really are there to market the home for the seller. So they can't point out unless there's major defects. If it came down to negotiation, technically they'd be negotiating in the seller's best interest. So I think sometimes for whatever reason buyers are hesitant to sign a buyer agency agreement with their buyer's agent, it's really important that you do. I know that Michelle and I think most agents, if you realize it's not working out, buyer's agent will rip up a contract. But never assume that if you want to move to a new agent, to a new buyer's agent, it's important that you would, get the contract rescinded and everything. A buyer's agent's responsibility, once the buyer agency is signed, is to be the advocate for the buyer. A good buyer's agent is going to be looking every day for properties for you. You might not hear every day from them because something might not come up, but every day they're looking for you. I would expect a buyer's agent is going to be communicating with you at a minimum once a week. Telling you what's going on in the market, that they're looking for you, some ideas that they're brainstorming to get the home for you, like if they're doing a writing campaign or things like that. A buyer's agent's responsibility is to understand the best offer that you can write to get the home. So you want a knowledgeable buyer's agent who understands the different contingencies that you could use, appraisal contingency, contingency, inspection, things like that. So you want a really knowledgeable buyer's agency. Buyer's agent. Blah. Another responsibility of a buyer's agent is once the deal, you have an accepted offer, they're really coordinating a lot behind the scenes. They're getting the inspection set up. They're working with the selling agent, with the appraiser. They're making sure all your deadlines are missed. They're working with your loan officer to make sure the loan is moving forward. So once that you have a signed contract, your buyer's agency is doing so much behind the scenes. I would say generally you don't even know that they're doing these things because once it's sold, a buyer's agent's goal really is to make it as simple as possible for you. Of course, if things come up and there's a problem, they're going to communicate with you, but overall, a buyer agency is really doing a lot of making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed from accepted offer to close. Okay, so we've talked about 4 different people that are involved in your transaction. Number 5. So we have an accepted offer. What's next? Next is probably your loan officer. And they kind of come into play. They absolutely come into play before you even start looking for homes. You're going to want to get pre-approval from a loan officer, a lending institution, so they're going to be in there. They're going to give you the pre-approval. They're going to get all your information as far as finances beforehand, and they're going to give you the range that you can purchase in. Then what happens once there's an accepted offer, your buying agent is going to send over to your loan officer the accepted offer, and then they're going to kind of kick in and they're going to do all the pieces that they need to do to get your loan commitment in time. So the loan officer, they have kind of pre-looking at houses where they're getting your pre-approval, and then as soon as your accepted offer comes in, they're off and running, getting the appraisal set up, getting the loan commitments, talking to underwriting. So they're really heavily involved before and after of your accepted offer. So what's next? We've gone through 5 people. Buyer, seller, listing agent, buying agent, loan officer. Then there is the appraiser. So what the appraiser is going to do is the loan offer is going to set up to have an appraiser come through your home if it's a finance loan. But the appraiser will go through the home. Generally, there's no other people in the home. The listing agent will let them in. But generally they want to be, I would say loan officers want to be as removed from the transaction as possible. That meaning that they don't want input from buyers and sellers and listers. You know what I mean? They're trying to do it by the books, what they see, and not have outside influences influencing their decision of what the appraisal is. So then they're going to come back with your appraisal. They'll send it back to your loan officer, who will let you and likely your buying agent know the appraisal came through. When that comes through, the appraiser, his job is really done. He's appraised your home. But what can happen is, based on his actions, then a negotiation might start in your offer again, because maybe he appraised it at lower, maybe he appraised it at higher, maybe he appraised right on. And that's all a different video about what happens when the appraisal doesn't come in, where the appraisal comes in. But so that's the sixth person that can be involved in your transaction. Seventh person involved in your transaction is an inspector. And again, this is generally in most transactions. In spring of 2022, there was a lot of people not having home inspections, craziness, and so there wasn't always an inspector involved. But if there's an inspector involved, what will happen is generally your buyer agents will help you out, schedule the inspection. They'll come through. At the end of the inspection, the inspector is going to go through a list of the things that they noticed in your house. And what I find is a lot of them kind of tag them as like, have to get done now, red alarm, things to watch, things that are great. Kind of, there's generally something that's kind of in between, like maintenance stuff. And so your inspector is going to, at the end of the inspection, he'll walk through and he'll point the things out: plumbing, windows, roofing, whatever needs to be fixed in his mind, and also the things that look good. And then once he's done his inspection, he sends a report back over to the buying agent and the buyer. And then generally, the buyer and the buyer's agent will share that with the listing side. And then the inspector's job is done in your transaction. Inspection's done. The eighth person that might be involved in your transaction is other contractors. So let's say your inspector went through the house and he said, oh, the plumbing, it looks like it needs to be looked at, or you need to get somebody out at your roof. Then you're going to bring these other contractors out into your house, and they'll tell you, like, all right, this needs to be repaired. Here's an estimate. That doesn't look too bad.